Lobo. His name means wolf in Spanish, but we're not talking about a wolf. We're talking about an action figure, based on a character from a comic book, based on somebody's nightmare. Okay, well, maybe not, but he's definitely a nightmarish character, especially armed to the teeth with a, giant hook and real chains and a bulldog. And Lobo is quite a figure, and he's got quite a story. He's not just your typical DCU character wave. He's a Comic-Con exclusive, and let's talk about him. But let's also talk about subscribing, because you should be subscribing to this channel. Because as soon as we hit 1,000 subscribers, we're going to unlock a bunch of really cool content that I've been kind of sitting on, waiting to make sure I had a big enough audience on the channel to kind of make sure it was worth putting all that information out. So if you haven't subscribed today, and everyone's happy, especially Lobo, right? Well, Lobo's always happy because he gets to be a toy. He gets to be a toy at San Diego Comic-Con. Now, today there is no shortage of Lobo toys and no shortage of, shall we say, inappropriate for children Lobo toys. Yeah, that's probably a good way of classifying this. And the reason I bring that up is because back in the day, before we did our Lobo at Comic-Con, Lobo was restricted. He was highly embargoed, off the table. We were not supposed to do him. We were supposed to avoid all versions of Lobo. He had what historically would be called an embargo. And, okay, yeah, I know, I keep making all these history jokes, and if you have no idea what this cartoon is talking about, then that's fine. The point is, you just need to know that Lobo was embargoed per our great partners at Warner Brothers and DC, so we had to kind of work around that issue. I mean, flash forward today, and again, to bring this image back, there is no shortage of Lobo product out today, and whether or not that product is aimed at kids or aimed at collectors, it almost kind of doesn't matter. It's the fact that Lobo's out there in all sorts of form factors, all different ways to collect him, and definitely not all of the Lobo product is out there specifically for adult collectors. I mean, you are going to find Lobo product that is clearly meant for children to play with. And this is interesting because for the longest time, as I said, we couldn't do Lobo toys, especially Lobo toys that kids might pick up, like this JLU Lobo. I mean, Lobo was in the JLU cartoon, right? And that cartoon was clearly aimed at children. And, he did his normal Lobo stuff, and he interacted with Superman. And, I mean, he didn't exactly, cut people's heads off or smoke cigarettes or things like that. Well, cigars. I don't think he smoked cigarettes. But, he did Lobo stuff. And for the longest time, we really wanted to do Lobo in the JLU line. And the answer was always no, because Warner Brothers felt that kids, if they bought a Lobo figure, were going to pick up a Lobo comic book, which were aimed at adults, right? Because, there's no Lobo comic books out there aimed at kids. Oh, boy, the evidence is just stacking up against this, isn't it? Look, just to say back in the day, 10, 15 years ago, Lobo was a lot more adult than he is today. I think the fact that he makes a lot of money in merchandise, he's kind of been tamed and made more kid-ready. But back in the day, a product like this, an Imaginext toy aimed at 4-year-olds with Lobo that would have never happened. I mean, we were told outright we could not do Lobo in the JLU line, and then, years later, he shows up in the, Super Friends Imaginext line. DC directed Lobo toys, but those were, at comic book shops only. The idea of doing Lobo in the DC Classics line at Mattel hinged on a lot of factors, and it really took the harmony of a lot of things coming together. And logistically, one of those things was having the body to do him. And there's no coincidence that he shared a lot of parts with Despero. And I'm going to get to that in a moment and explain all of that fun. But all right, so let's get some background in first. We wanted to do something special for San Diego Comic-Con. We had just signed a new master agreement with Warner Brothers Consumer Products to do the entire DC universe in 6-inch scale, not just Batman and Superman. And in the past, the Comic-Con exclusives that Mattel had done were, well, to say the least, they weren't spectacular. They were cool. I'm not saying they weren't good toys, but they didn't kind of push the boundaries. And, well, I have a philosophy that a Comic-Con item should be a toy that doesn't really fit into a retail line, but complements an overall collection. So I don't like just doing, new heads or a fancy package. I always felt that a Comic-Con exclusive should be an item that was needed for a larger collection, but just was impossible for one reason or another to get it to retail. So Comic-Con was basically an outlet, a retail outlet, to bring those toys to fans to complete the collection. Anyway, so that was kind of like my motivating factor whenever we were looking at Comic-Con items. And as I said a moment ago, we had just signed a new master agreement with Warner Brothers and DC, allowing us to unlock the entire DC universe. The whole vault was now open. It wasn't going to be limited as it was in the past, and we got all that mail from fans saying, why can't you do Flash, or can you just do one Wonder Woman figure? But we didn't have rights. We did not have the rights to do that. Until we signed that new master toy agreement in 2007, we meaning Mattel, only had the rights to do characters from the Superman library, which included Superman's villains, Superman's allies, Superman's friends, and of course variant after variant after variant of the big Man of Steel himself, which is why you just saw a ton of Superman characters in the line. So we were basically making Superman figures, and the contract also allowed us to make Batman figures. So again, we could do Batman, we could do his villains, we could do his sidekicks, we could do Bruce Wayne, like this figure here. Bruce Wayne counts as Batman, right? Yeah, I think he does. And that was it. We could not do any characters that were outside of these two families. Another thing about the line is it really was aimed at kids. Yes, we know collectors were into it, but kids were the bulk of sales, which meant figures didn't have sort of that extra touch for collectors. Like, Doomsday here was not in proper scale to Superman. He was just made as a fun toy for kids. Yes, collectors were buying it, but the idea of doing a Doomsday that was properly scaled to Superman was going to take something like a adult collector-centric line, which is what DCU Classics was. DC Superheroes, while collectors were buying it, it was absolutely a kid-based line. I've mentioned in some previous videos, 80% of all toys, even quote-unquote collector toys, are sold to kids and parents. They are not sold to adult collectors. We make up a much smaller amount of the population. So that's why figures like Joker, for example, from the DC Superheroes line, before the Master Agreement, he was shorter than Batman. And that's not the way, the proper height should be. In proper height, Joker should have been a little bit taller than Batman. But because this line was aimed at kids, it was felt, I remember specifically, the heads of marketing thought that the villain should not be bigger than the hero, which is why Joker was scaled down to make him smaller than Batman. So, yeah, Batman and Robin toys aimed at kids. That's where the money is, and that's what DC Superheroes was all about. And of course, all of that changed when we had the master license, and the idea was to take the 6-inch line and aim it specifically at collectors. Even though it was a smaller market, it was felt that kids were going to appreciate this, and this, we were still going to do kid product, but the full license meant we could start to look at more adult product that wasn't aimed at kids. So product that we just did not have access to making previously under the original agreement, the new master license was going to allow us to expand that and really do an adult collector line. And Comic-Con provided the venue to do a lot of this, and that was kind of part of the condition of doing Lobo. All right, so I talked about Despero earlier and how his body and Lobo's share, and that's because of logistics. So originally, Despero was supposed to come first, which meant we were going to be able to tool the body, the larger buck, against Wave 4, which had Despero in it, and that was going to pay for Lobo. But because of the way things went, Lobo came out second. Now, we really wanted to pay attention to height and the way, like I said, Joker wasn't the right height, Superman and Doomsday weren't the right height. Now, we know Superman is a little bit above 6 feet tall, so a 6-inch figure, if you're going to go 1 inch equals 1 foot. So, that meant that Lobo was closer to 8 feet. I don't know. Maybe we did do him a little bit too tall. I know this was a contention with fans about Lobo's height. He's supposed to be a little under 8 feet. Superman is supposed to be 6 feet, so that makes him 2 feet bigger. I don't know. He kind of feels 2 feet bigger to me, but this was basically, again, tied into the logistics of Despero and the fact that Despero was supposed to pay for Lobo, and instead Lobo paid for Despero, and that basically meant the Despero figures, like the way the cost work, it didn't work, basically. But somehow we did it. Somehow we did the impossible, and we made this work, putting the tooling against a Comic-Con figure, which is never supposed to happen. Comic-Con figures are supposed to be done not cheaply, but affordably, again, with the main line used. All right, so you're probably wondering, why is he in 3D? What's with all the 3D on Lobo? And it was just kind of a fun packaging execution. Back then, 10, 15 years ago, doing unique, fun packaging for Comic-Con was all the rage, whether it was lights and sounds or glow in the dark. And Frank Varela wanted to do a 3D package because, everything is better in 3D, right? I know, it's crazy, but that's kind of where the mindset was. And we did it. We made Lobo. We checked him off the list. It couldn't have been possible without the support of Warner Brothers and DC. I mean, they were amazing allowing us to do this and really break out from where we had been with the brand before. All right. Well, if you like this channel and you like what you see, again, share this video. I would most appreciate it. And, of course, I'd appreciate subscriptions because that kind of is the best way to support the channel ongoing and long-term support. And we'll continue to pump out more videos like 3D Lobo and all the fun that he brings to your collection. All right, guys, keep on coming back. We got a lot more DC toys to talk about.